Are you an RPA developer? Are you already working in UiPath? Have you worked with ReFramework? Then you've probably heard the term dictionary. But what does dictionary mean? What do we use dictionary for? What is the relationship between dictionary and config file in ReFramework? In this video I will explain to you what dictionary is, how to create and work with a dictionary, how do I use dictionary in ReFramework. If the topic is interesting for you, then watch the video to the end, so you can understand this topic in a very easy way. Are you ready? Let's start. In UiPath or any other tool or programming language, you use variables to store and pass data in code. However, the variables have different data types, depending on what you want to store in the variable. If you want to save a text, you can use string type for example. If you want to store a number, you can use integer, double, decimal, or other number types. But there are many other data types that can be used for the variables, like arrays, time, boolean, and many others. Dictionary is also one of these data types. You can also store data in a dictionary. But not every data type stores data in the same way. Dictionary, for example, has this structure. It consists of two parts, key and value. What do these mean exactly? As the name suggests, dictionary data type is exactly the same as a dictionary in English. This means, in the dictionary you have different words. There is an explanation for every word. For example, the word apple. Here you can find a text, that apple is a kind of fruit. The apple is the key in this example. And the text for it is the value. Whenever you want to know what a word means, you have to enter the word, the key. As an answer you get the text, the value. Dictionary can also be seen as a translator. For example, English-German dictionary. You enter the word in English, then you get the translation in German. For example, apple means apfel in German. Apple in this example is the key, and apfel is the value. As you can see, key and value are of type string. But that doesn't always have to be the case. This means that we can use any data type here as we wish. For example, key is string and value is integer. Key is integer and value is DataTable. Key is integer and value is integer. Key is string and value is object. As you can see, you can put whatever suits you best. It is recommended that we use this combination. Key is string and value is object. In this case, the keys are texts. The values can be arbitrary at this point. This means that we can not only store the value as text, but also as number, data table, boolean, etc. Let's take an example to learn how to store or retrieve data in dictionary. First I will show you what the data looks like inside a dictionary. Suppose we have a dictionary of type string. Data is entered within curly brackets. Inside the curly brackets there are more curly brackets. Each bracket contains a key value pair. Each pair is separated by a comma. As already mentioned, pair consists of two parts, key and value. I put the different pairs on different lines to make it easier to understand. This is what the data looks like inside the dictionary. Let's take an example. We have the variable x as a dictionary of the type string. In this dictionary there are three pairs. The first pair is apple fruit. Key is apple, value is fruit. The second pair is milk drinking. Key is milk, value is drinking. The third pair is school building. Key is school, value is building. Now I will show you how to read the data from dictionary. It is important that we always have to know the key. What we want to read is the value. This means that if I want to read the value, I have to enter the key. This is how it works. First we write the name of the variable, then the key in brackets. We can use toString function at the end to get the value as a string. But we can use other functions to get the value in a specific data type. As a result we get the value. For example, I want to get the value from key apple. For this I set the statement as follows. As a result I get this value. In this way we can read the values from a dictionary. Now I'll show you how to add a key value pair to a dictionary. Suppose we only have these two pairs in the dictionary. I want to insert a new pair. Key is apple, and value is fruit. You can do that as follows. In an assign activity you add the key on the left side using the variable name. On the right side we enter the value. In this way we can add new data into a dictionary. Now you know what dictionary is. How to read or insert data into a dictionary. In the next part I will show you the config file, what we have as standard in UiPath ReFramework. After that I will show you how to convert this config file to dictionary. I will do this in 3 different ways. The first one is using the UiPath standard activities. The second one using a package. The third one using LINQ Query. Let's go. If you use a ReFramework template, you get a config file with it. This config file is a configuration file for the process. In this part of the video, I will explain the config file, how to work with it. The config file or configuration file is used to keep key projects separate from the workflows. Using it allows us to edit the configurations at any point, without needing to modify the project. The config file by default contains 3 sheets: settings, constants, and assets. I will explain the 3 sheets, what we can or should enter in each one of them. Let's start with settings sheet. In this sheet we can store any configuration related to the business process. For example, URLs, file paths, credential names, or any process-specific information. We can also add the business process name, for example, export reports. Or the queue name, for example, reports queue. The sheet consists of 3 columns: name, value, and description. Name column contains always a string. This is the key in the dictionary later. Value column contains the values, which we want to read in the process later. We can read the content of this column using the key column, as I explained it before. The third column, description, provides a detailed information of each setting. But we don't use it in the process. Its role to keep developer informed, what each line in the config file contains. That's all about the settings sheet. Let's check the constants sheet. The constants sheet stores technical settings that are useful for developers. It contains information, such as the number of retries, default paths, and static log message parts. It contains also 3 columns: name, value, and description. We read the information from it in the same way as we read from the settings sheet. That's all about the constants sheet. Let's check the assets sheet. In this sheet we define the assets stored in Orchestrator, which we use in the process. It consists of 4 columns: name, asset, Orchestrator asset folder, and description. As in the case of the previous sheets, we use the first column, name, as key in the dictionary. In the second column we store the name of asset. Using this value we can read the asset from Orchestrator. The third column is to set the folder, where the assets are stored in Orchestrator. If we leave it empty, the robot uses the default folder to read the assets. This means, if this is empty, the assets are stored in the default folder. The last column is description for the developer, to know what we have in each line. Very important to know here, that we can't use this mechanism for assets of type credential. This means, we can only add the assets of type, text, boolean, or number. The credential asset should be entered in the settings sheet, because it contains 2 values, username and password. That's all about assets sheet. If you want to learn more about assets, you can watch the video Orchestrator on my channel. I explained assets in the video in details. If you also like my videos and want to see more videos and help me, please subscribe my channel and share the video with your friends. Now we know, what is config file for, and what contains. We know also, what we have to add in each sheet. As mentioned, we have these 3 sheets by default, but we also can add new sheets, depending on what we need in the process. Let's now see, how to convert this Excel file into a dictionary. As already mentioned, I will show you how to convert in 3 ways. Let's start with the first way. Convert config to dictionary using the UiPath standard activities. I have here my Excel config file. It consists of 3 sheets: settings, constants, and assets. Let's see the first sheet, settings. It contains this table. The table consists of 3 columns, as mentioned: name, value, and description. We have within the table an empty row also. For each name there is a value, but the last one contains no value, but a text which explained that this value will be override by asset. What does this mean? Let's check the assets sheet. In the assets sheet I have the same name as in the settings sheet. But here I have a value. This value is the asset name. I want later to read the asset from Orchestrator using this name. And then I want to write the value in the settings sheet. This is the asset in Orchestrator. As you see, we have here the name and the value for it. Let's check the last sheet, constants. It also consists of 3 columns. There are names and values, and also empty rows. In this part of video I will show you how to read this config file as DataTable. And then I want to convert this data table to dictionary. First I will copy the path of the config file, because I need it later in the process. In UiPath I will first create the variables, which I need in the process. The first one is the config file path. I will add the path in the default value. I will create the dictionary variable, which I want to fill in using the config file. Dictionary is not standard type in UiPath, therefore we have to browse for it as follows. We have to define which type is for key and which one for value. I will use string for key and object for value. I will create another variable for the sheets. It's of type ArrayString. I will add the sheet names here. Only the first two sheets, settings and constants. Because the third sheet, assets, has another mechanism, therefore I will use it later in another way. We have now all variables, which we need at the beginning. The first thing we have to do now, is initializing the dictionary, so that we can add data into it. We can do it as follows. In assign activity we write the following. New dictionary, and then the both types for key and value. They should be the same as what we defined for the variable. Now we want to read the config file. For this we add first for each activity. This loop is to go through the first two sheets, settings and constants. We use here the sheets variable, which we defined at the beginning. Change type argument to string, because we have only strings in this variable. Now add read range activity to read the content of the both sheets. We set first the path variable. Then we change the name of the sheet, which we defined here in the loop. I will remove this range, because I want to read the entire sheet content. I will create a variable for the output. It's of type DataTable. Now we have the config file in a DataTable variable. Add for each row activity to go through all rows of the table. In this loop we can convert the DataTable into a dictionary. First we have to check if the current row is empty. We can do this as follows. This statement checks if the row is empty or not. If the row is not empty, we will do something for it. If the row is empty, we don't want to do anything for this row. After checking the row, we want to add this row to the dictionary. We can do it as follows. We have to add the key and the value. The key is the content of the column name. To add a key, we use first the dictionary variable, then we take the content of the column name. Using this statement we add a new key to the dictionary. On the right side of assign activity we want to add the value. The value is the content of the column value from config file. In this way we added each name from the config file as key into the dictionary. And for each name we added also the value from the config file. Now we added the first two sheets into the dictionary. Let's move to the last sheet, Assets. First we have to read the sheet from Excel. We add read range activity. Also the path for this file. And then the sheet name. I will also delete this range, because I want to read the entire sheet. I will create a variable for the content of this sheet. It's of type DataTable. After reading the table, we want to go through all rows. For this I will add for each row activity. As mentioned, in this sheet we have the assets, which we stored in Orchestrator. This means, we have to read the assets from Orchestrator. For this we add getAssetActivity. To read an asset we need the asset name. This is the content of the column asset in the config file. As output I will create a variable, asset value. It's of type string. In this loop we will go through all rows and read the assets from Orchestrator. After reading the assets, we want to add this value into the dictionary. As already mentioned, the asset value should be added into the sheet settings. Sheet settings is already saved in the dictionary, therefore we will add this value directly into the dictionary. This means, we will add the same key as we did before. The value is the asset value, which we got from Orchestrator. Now we have read all sheets and added the data into dictionary. The first activity is to initialize the dictionary. The second activity, for each loop, is to loop through sheet settings and constants into dictionary. This activity is to read the third sheet from config file. The last activity, for each row, is to read the assets from Orchestrator and add them into the same dictionary. I will add some write line activities, to show you how to read data from dictionary. First I will read the queue name. Then the mail folder done, which is defined as asset. The last one is the success log message, which is saved in constants sheet. Let's run the code to see the results. As you see, we have first the queue name, which is saved in settings sheet. The second one is the asset value, which we got from Orchestrator. The last one is the success log message from constants sheet. That's all about converting config file into a dictionary using the UiPath standard activities. Let's now move to the next method. Converting config into a dictionary using a package. In this part of video I will convert the same config file into a dictionary, but I will only convert one sheet. You can use this method to convert also the other sheets. First I need to install the package. To do this, I will navigate to Manage Packages. Then to All Packages. After that I will search for the package. Package name is Microsoft.Activities.Extensions. I will install and save it. As you see, we have now new activities under Microsoft. We need from these activities only two: add to dictionary and key exists in dictionary. Let's now start the implementation. I will first create the variables, which I need. The first one is the config file path. I will add the path under default value. The next variable is dictionary variable. I will search for it in the same way as I did in the previous part. I will use key as string, and value as object. And the last variable is a DataTable variable for the config file. This variable contains the config file after reading it. It will contain data from only one sheet as mentioned. I will first initialize the dictionary, as I did in the first method. Now I will add read range activity to read the config file. Set the config path here. And the sheet name. I will convert only sheet settings to dictionary. If you want to convert the other sheets, you have to add a loop as in the first method. For assets you can also use the same method as I did in the previous part. I will delete this range, because I want to read the entire sheet. And then I will save the data into the DataTable variable. Now add for each row activity to go through all rows of this sheet, and then to add them into the dictionary. Now add the activity, add to dictionary, to add the rows into the dictionary. Once you add this activity, this pop-up window appears. Here you have to set the types of key and value. I will use the same types as I did for the dictionary variable. Key is string, and value is object. Now we have to add three values. First the dictionary variable. Then the key. The key is the content of column name from the Excel file. We add this column using this statement. And the last one is the value. The value is the content of column value from the Excel file. After running this loop, all rows from Excel are converted into a dictionary. Let's add write line activity to check if we added the values correct. I will print the queue name to the console. Here we have to add the dictionary variable, and then the key, which we want to get. Using this statement we will get the value for this key. It means, we will get the queue name from the dictionary. Let's run the code to see the result. As you see, we have the queue name. It means, everything is done correctly. As mentioned, I wrote the code for only one sheet, but you can do it also for the other sheets, as we did in the first method. Let's now move to the last method. Convert config into dictionary using a LINQ query. First I will show you how the query looks like. It consists of 4 parts. The first and last one are brackets. Within these brackets we have 2 parts. The first one is from statement. We use this statement to read the data. For this we define a variable, for example row. After this variable we set the preposition in, and then the name of the data table. Using this statement we go through all rows of the data table. Its function is like for each row activity in UiPath. The next statement is select. Using this statement we define what we want to read from each row. I will first create a key value pair variable. It's exactly the same as a dictionary. Then we define the types for key and value. For example, key is string and value is object. After that we have to define which one is the key and which one is the value. The first one is always the key and the second one is the value. As you know, the key in our config file is the name column, therefore I will use the row variable to get the content of this column. The value is the value column from the config file. In this way we defined a key value pair with the content from the config file. After the bracket I will add the function to dictionary, to convert this key value pair into a dictionary. After the function we set what we want to save in the key, and what we want to save in the value. We do this using these functions. X and Y are only variables, which we can use as we want. It means, you don't have to set these both names, but you can write the name you want. You can also use the same variable name for both, key and value. This is the query to convert a data table into a dictionary. Let's write this query in UiPath and check it, if it also works fine as the other methods. First I will create the needed variables. The first one is the Excel config file path. I will add the path in the default value. The next one is the dictionary variable. It's of type dictionary string object. The last variable I need is a data table variable for the content of the Excel file. First I need to read the Excel file. For this I add read range activity. Add the path here. Set the name of the sheet, which you want to read. If you have more than one sheet and you want to read all sheets, you have to add a loop to read all sheets. In this example I will only read one sheet, settings, and convert it into a dictionary. I will delete the range, because I want to read the entire sheet. Save the data into the data table variable, which is created at the beginning. Now I will add an assign activity to write the LINQ query. I will write the same query, as I showed you before. Here as already mentioned, you don't have to use these 2 variable names. You can use any variable you want. For example 𝗵𝗽𝗆 for both, key and value. Or also X for both. The query is done. Let's add write_line activity to check if the converting is correctly done. I will print the queue name into the console. Let's run the code to see the result. As you see, we have the queue name from the config file. This was the last method, how to convert a data table into a dictionary. As you see, each method has exact the same result. You can choose any method you want. But the LINQ Query method is the fastest one. I hope you could learn in this video more about dictionary and config file, and how to convert a data table into a dictionary. This video is very important for you, if you want to work with ReFramework in UiPath, because we use there the config file, and we have to convert it into a dictionary. If you like my video, please share it with your friends. If you also have any comments or questions, please write me a comment. Have a nice day and wait for the ReFramework video. It will be very interesting and explained in very easy way, as I did in my videos. Goodbye.